Hello, my Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. Happy Thursday. We're on day number 2 of shadow work, and today's a good one. Just as a side note, apparently during this show, because a lot of people watch it after, my straight hair has grown its own following. But guys, my baby curls, my little snakes needed a break from the torture iron. So they're like, we don't care, just get on with the show. But anyways, so yeah, curly hair for a few days. Yay! Anyways, at least they're cooperating. Yeah, see, that's how you punish them. You straighten them. Then they say, wait, no. So anyways, sorry. I'm just all over the place. All right, day 2. The shadow shows itself. When we recognize our shadow, sorry. Let me try this again. When we recognize our shadow sides coming up, we try to avoid acknowledging these parts at all costs. When we see other people demonstrating our shadow traits, we may have strong negative reactions because one, we do not want to associate with those traits, and two, we may resent that other people get to express those sides of themselves while we don't. It is in the nature of our shadows that we cannot see them clearly. To look at them directly would be too painful. For this reason, shadows are more easily identified by other people, and conflict is likely to result when one person remarks on the shadow side of another person. So let's break this down, okay? Uh, the next week or so is basically going to be dedicated to shadow work because, and I broke this article down yesterday. It is from Psychology Today. I will be posting it. I found another article very similar to that one that I think the Psychology Today article was based on, and it has a little bit more of the explanations in certain parts. And I believe that was actually the one that I used a couple years ago for using the shadow work because it really focuses on the Carl Jung aspect of getting into this part of ourselves and healing it. Now, for those that haven't, seen the show before, when I first started the shadow journey, I realized that what needed work was my own inner child. And for a lot of people, it can be a lot of different things. For me, I just decided it was my inner child because there was such well, everything went back to there, and that this child had to grow up really fast. So I called it the feral floof. And over the course of the shadow work, I noticed that the feral floof went to like all the way up to like, the free floof, the liberated floof. I just kept realizing that there was a progression in the healing. Now, for that, I just used a regular cheap grocery store spiral notebook. Sometimes I love using those as my journals. They're very simple, they're very fun. You can decorate the front just like, when we were in school. But yeah, so I really want to stress that having someone on this journey that you trust, or a professional, or both, is very, I think, important to this journey working. And it has to be someone that is not afraid to that isn't afraid in life to call you out on your shit. Okay. Older sibling was on this journey with me, baby sibling was on this journey with me when I did the shadow work. So shadow work can be very, very important. But like I said, it is very important. If you can't afford professional help, make sure you have a trusted friend that isn't going to be your yes person. It needs to be a person that you can trust with these feelings, that you can sit with when it comes to bringing up the shadow work, and that you can that is also going to tell you, hey, I can see this trigger coming up. All right. Older sibling was always very good at bottom lining it with me. So like I said, over the next 7 or 8 days, I think we're going to go through next Friday with the shadow work. So I hope you all hang in there. Like I said, you can watch these later, you can watch it live, whatever you choose to do. But shadow work is very, very important. So yesterday I talked about the benefits of shadow work. Shadow work is hard and uncomfortable work, which is why the benefits of shadow work are valuable, a good return for your effort. Now, before I go into what I just read, a little bit of backstory. I always thought that shadow work was a very metaphysical thing. And because I had first heard of it on that spiritual journey, I first heard of it in other groups that I belonged to. And I was kind of like, wow, this is magical. And it did feel magical because, it's touching a part of you that you've kind of resisted either looking at or that you've just kind of shut away, right? Like, it's like that one outfit you don't like wearing and you just lock it into the back of the closet. So that's kind of what the shadow is. But it turns out that while that is partially true, and it does make its way in there, because if you really think about it, doing this deep dive into ourselves really kind of helps us, find that person that is buried in there. Not just this surface person that has to deal with everyday things, but this part of us that is locked away, that has been locked away either by any kind of trauma, whether it's, childhood trauma, adult trauma, grief, loss. And grief and loss doesn't necessarily mean somebody died. I mean, there could be issues that have caused a separation in people. So there's a lot of different things that can cause the shadow to really just kind of buckle down. And in a way, it's like compartmentalizing, except we're forgetting about it because we just don't want to deal with it. And so it's like pushing down those emotions. But in my experience, and of course the gardeners are here today. So all right, let's see if I can get this. In my experience, what you push down is eventually going to come back up again, and it's not going to be pretty. I hope you guys can hear me. I mean, usually the gardeners come later and my window's closed, so sorry about that. Anyways, I know it's not even that it's loud, it's hard to concentrate. So anyways, Carl Jung, who was a trainee of Sigmund Freud, he's a Swiss psychologist, actually came up with shadow work. It's kind of where, to be honest with you, in all the things that I've read, that oh, hi Allie, thank you. Thank you. I know. I'm just gonna be like those people that just hold the mic up to their face. But but anyways, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, Jung was a trainee, but he had his own traumas as a child, and part of his therapy, he realized that it's not just a surface thing. You have to really go deep, like really deep. And so he's really the father of shadow work, which is great. I mean, it from the things that I've read and the stories I've read, it feels like this is kind of where they separated, because Freud didn't necessarily oh, okay, thank you. I love that. Look at that. 5,000 miles away, and she's helping me out. Thank you. So anyways, Freud, his approach to psychology was different. Obviously the grandfather of psychology, and Carl Jung, his approach was different. And this is good because, therapy isn't a one size fits all. It's a mixed bag of techniques. And so this is kind of where they separated, because they didn't really agree on this. So anyways, the first part, when we recognize our shadow sides coming up, we try to avoid acknowledging these parts at all costs. When we see other people demonstrating our shadow traits, we may have strong negative reactions because we, one, do not want to associate with those traits, and two, may resent that other people get to express those sides of themselves while we don't. Oh, this is where all the skeletons in my closet just fall out, I have been there. I have done that. I have had triggers. I have had verbal explosions. I threw a muffin once at somebody. Older sibling and I were laughing about that last night, and she was the one I threw it at. But I had never thrown anything in my life. It just happened to be in my hand. There was a lot of stress happening. It was a very stressful time. And, and that's what she's always tried to tell me. But I told her, I said, there's no excuse. I mean, thank God it was just a muffin. But in that moment, I mean, it was like I was standing outside of myself. It literally was like I was standing outside of myself. And one of the things is one of the people that was supposed to be there helping us out, I think they just went into their shell. And that was a person who really could have benefited from shadow work, as I have in later years. Now, this is years ago. This is before I even let siblings just kind of tap the surface of telling me that I needed professional help. And I did need professional help. I went through a lot, that a lot of secret stuff as a kid. And, and like I said, where it got confusing, and this is what I found out with my shadow work, where it got confusing was that I was groomed very young, but I also had a very wonderful, supportive family. So my mom and dad made everything better. And so I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want to mess up that, that part of the nucleus that I had, and I know that they told, they even gave me the talk, but by then it was too late because it really did start very young. And I don't think people realize how young it can start. But my parents made everything safe and they made everything okay. So it just became that secret that you hold in. Unfortunately, like I said, when you hold something in, it builds and it builds and it builds. And a lot of times it's not necessarily going to build to where you just outwardly yell at somebody. No, there could be different triggers. You could either shut down completely. You can just go into a hole. You can become very quiet. I was always very quiet unless I was around people I knew. Then I could talk and talk and talk and talk. But but there is that part that got confusing, and that's where my shadow stuff came in. And so as I got older and moved far away from that, I just suppressed it. I didn't compartmentalize it. To me, in a way, compartmentalizing means to me, and this may not be what it means to other people, but to me, it means, okay, I'm going to put this over here for now and I'll deal with it later. But I didn't. I just like, you know what, that's my past. I don't want to deal with it. As my mom would say, you need to be stronger. And so I just walked away from all of it. I thought, okay, I just got to buckle down and be strong like the world around me. But eventually it came back up. And, I started to see, traits that I didn't want to associate with. I realized that a lot of times when I flew off the handle for some of the silliest and dumbest and smallest reasons was because not because of what was happening in that moment, but because of all this pain and all this trauma and all this angst that I had pushed down for so long. And so eventually, when I learned how to do shadow work, I realized the hardest thing I'm going to have to do is face this. And it is very uncomfortable work. It's very hard work. But the end result, your payout in the end is so worth it. And it's so, I don't know how to explain it. It's going to be the best gift you ever give yourself. And this is why I really wanted to do this after self-love. To be honest with you, I probably should have done it beforehand, but it wasn't until we were doing the self-love lessons that I realized that shadow work really does play a key role in our self-love. And that may feel like it's just an opinion to me or to everybody out there, but I really think that it's a foundation that sits with the self-love. It helps create that foundation because you are healing a part of you that has been ignored for so long that you don't even realize what is probably setting you off, okay, or triggering you or causing you to just fly off the handle. And and like I said, a lot of times we just think we've dealt with it. So understanding these traits and knowing that you're going to have to get uncomfortable. You got to get uncomfortable or get what is the phrase? Get comfortable being uncomfortable for a little bit. And this is why it's good to have somebody with you when you're not necessarily, they don't have to be at your side, all right? Just someone you can text if you really start to fall apart and you just don't want to spiral. So also, we may resent that other people get to express these sides of themselves while we don't. So I talked about Sissy Joe, okay? I hate talking about her this way because our good times definitely outnumbered our bad times. She was the first soul sister I really adopted. And I met her just a year or so before I met older sibling. And then the three of us were like the three musketeers. I mean, we really were. We traveled together. we hung out. Sissy Joe would come over on the weekends, or we'd go over and visit her. And, it was just, we were really soul sisters, the three of us. But Sissy Joe had trauma as a kid. And, and so her and I, sometimes we'd have some pretty good rows, okay? And it was not pretty. I mean, when by the time we got to our highest pitch, we sounded like cats fighting in alleys. So, and so we also made really good sports fans because you could hear us about a mile away. But and her and I eventually talked about this. We finally, got to a point where it's like, we can't keep doing this anymore. We're too old for this. All right, we're too old for this. We need to really learn how to sit down and just talk. And so I think for us, I hate using her as an example. I can feel her right now. I know that's going to sound weird to other people, but I can feel her right now just going, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Like literally, I can feel a tingle in my ear. So I know it's her. And I think it's because even though she's passed away, I know that somehow, in my personal beliefs, I know that she and my mom have really kind of guided me through all this. Probably shielded, older sibling from me from time to time because it was some tough work. It was some tough work, but and probably shielded me in a way. But I know that it's the best example because when you have two people that have gone through something, and our traumas were very different, but when you have two people that go through something and then all of a sudden they come together, it's going to be like the Clash of the Titans because um there's a trait that we see in them, there's a trait that they see in us, and then it's just like, all that resentment just it fills up to the point where you just explode. And then you're fighting over the dumbest things, like literally the dumbest things, or you're taking things personally, which causes a fight. And and I don't mean an argument, I mean a fight, not a physical one but a verbal one. And then you just kind of keep going until you're worn out, until you're just like, and you can't anymore, or one of you just cracks and walks away. And I know when I look back that that's exactly what it was. It was never about whatever dumb thing we were fighting about. It was because there was so much steam piling up in the both of us that we needed to get it out, you know. And I do believe that she's guided me on this journey. Like I said, I have very specific beliefs, okay, and I'm not afraid of sharing them. You don't have to agree with me; it's fine. I mean, everybody, I don't judge. You do you, and I'll do me. But I do have very specific beliefs, and I do know that her and my mom are around a lot, and I'm grateful for that because, you know, I mean, you can take the sister off the planet, but you can't take the sister out of my life, all right, or my mom. So we do have those traits that are buried in us that we see in others, and it's like, well, how come they get to do it? It's not fair. So when you find that one person that's got the same problem you do, it's not going to end pretty. Okay, it's not going to end pretty. Now, older sibling, I'm going to use her as an example because she's always been very good at being in touch with her shadow self. I mean, your shadow self, when you heal it, it doesn't necessarily go away. Your shadow is a positive. There is light and dark in your shadow. Okay. And that's okay. We don't have to be all love and light. All right. I mean, I sit there like, yeah, love and light to you. But I mean, hey, I'm human. I have a dark side. I have a dark side. And it's just kind of like, where you just driving down the street and some ass hat cuts you off and is like, oh, MFR, blah, blah, blah. I realize I'm swearing so much on this one. I need to reel it in a little bit. Um, and it's so, just on a side note, swearing is so freeing. I don't really care. It doesn't bother me. I reel it in with around my nieces and nephews, but that's about it. But anyways, but yeah, I mean, and these are things that may come up because, but the difference is when your shadow is just the light and dark side of you, or your light and darkness, you're like, you might say, hey, I'm a fur, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then, by the next light, you're like, la, la, you're singing to your tunes again. Now, when you have the shadow and the shadow is outweighing the light, then that's when it comes in and you hold that, and for the rest of the day, that one person that cut you off has just made you mad for the rest of the day. It just ruined your day. because the shadow and the light are unbalanced. There's an imbalance between the two. How about that? So anyways, in the next part, it is in the nature of our shadows that we cannot see them clearly. To look at them directly would be too painful. I'm going to cut this paragraph in half. This is exactly what I mean by you have to get comfortable. Over the next week, you're going to need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. These are just the lessons. How long it takes you to work through your shadows is going to depend on how willing you are to open yourself up. Think of it as spiritual heart surgery. All right. You are literally opening yourself up wide, and you're kind of poking at your soul there, going, hey, you know what, maybe we should talk, maybe we should get down to business and start healing these bits of you that are hurting, because I'm going to tell you, it can cause health problems. And by that, I'm not saying that, oh, if you hold things in, this is, I don't know if that's true or not. In my own experience with some people, it seems to might have been, but that's a whole different thing and a whole different belief system. But when I'm talking about it can affect your health, it can affect your mental health because you're down on yourself. When people hurt you, it hurts extra, and it's hard to let that go because it does feel very personal. Even if it's not personal, it can feel very personal because you start having self-doubt, your self-esteem gets shot, your confidence is shot, and you're just kind of like starting to think that you are the most worthless person on the planet because of maybe one thing someone said. And that's because our self-love is fragile and our shadow work is fragile. And so that's why the last series and this series is working together to strengthen that, so that you can remind yourself that, hey, maybe I messed up here, but I'm trying to make amends for it. Or maybe I didn't do anything, but someone seems to be mad at me for something. And that might be their shadow just taking it out on you because you're standing there. Okay. I mean, sometimes we are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when it comes to it being painful, like I said, my shadow work took a long time, but mostly because I had buried so much. And most of that, like I said, came up during that intense therapy I had for 6 months in 2017. But after that, I was like, okay, I'm healed, but I wasn't. I thought I was healed because I had finally acknowledged it, but I hadn't healed it yet. So it was still sitting inside of me, but it was better. It was a little bit more manageable. And when I found out about shadow work and I started doing the shadow work, I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot happening in here. I filled up 4 of those high school type notebooks that we use with the spiral notebooks, just one subject, okay, like about 100 pages each. But when you write on each side, right, it's like 200 pages. So I literally filled up about 4 of those, 4.5. And each one was really kind of different to the next one. But as I went along, it became more of a book about it became a private place, that secret place, that place at the top of the mountain where you can go and scream and nobody hears you on purpose. You're just like, I got to get all this out of me. And it was a place that I needed. It was a very simple book. It was a very but a very tough process. And when I blew through it finally, I was kind of like, I looked back and I thought, gee, I really haven't come that far. And then older sibling and I were talking about something, and something came on the TV, and I was like, wow, that sucks. And I realized, wait a minute, those are the kind of stories that really used to affect me, that really used to just kind of gut punch me. And I would just kind of slip back within myself and just become very quiet. That's how people know when something's not right with me. I just get very quiet. And and I looked at her and I said, oh my God. I said, I think the shadow work is working. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm all, well, we just watched that thing, and it was just like another news story to me. Not that I didn't care. I had the empathy, but I didn't have the raw emotions that came with the empathy like it used to, where I would go into my hole and just be really upset and sad about it. So, it was just, and just kind of withdraw. So it can also help with our triggers. I notice I yell at people a lot less when I'm driving now. Or if I do, because I told you guys before in one of my shows, a lot of times it's just because I panic, because it scares me, and it's just kind of like, whoa. But I don't carry it to the next, to the next mile. It's just kind of like, okay, that happened. I'm fine. Let's keep going. And that is new for me. So it is a new experience, trying to understand the triggers, because the triggers don't always go away. I'm not sure if they ever do. Mine still haven't. I've just learned how to deal with them, and to deal with them in a healthy way. So when we talk about it is in the nature of our shadows that we cannot see them clearly, to look at them directly would be too painful. That's why we don't see them clearly, because we are afraid to look at them. And I think a lot of that is shame. Maybe we're ashamed of how we acted. Maybe we're ashamed of how we reacted. Maybe we're ashamed of, what happened, in our life that caused this, like, well, why didn't I know better? Why didn't I do better? Don't worry about that. Whatever your choices were, whatever happened, that was behind you. And now it's time for you to figure out how to heal yourself, to give yourself permission to heal yourself, and to give yourself permission to look back into those things that hurt you so terribly, so you can heal them, and that you can get your life back to a point where you really feel like you are thriving. The whole idea of the Aloha Perspective is to help people get from surviving to thriving, and then from time and time again, or from time to time, throw in a little bit of something else, right? What is it? A little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. So, but this is a whole lot of everything right now, because this is our psyche. This is that part of us that we really want to heal, so that we can go through the rest of our lives knowing that, hey, you know what? Yeah, even if I do lose my shit from time to time, I have the tools to buckle down. And I know therapy can be expensive. So, I'm trying to do my part to help people, and like I said, I know some people are embarrassed to go to therapy because they don't want to be seen going into an office. Therapy's online now. Okay, there is therapy online. So, there's that. So let's get to the last part. For this, okay, so I'm going to read the whole thing because I did cut that in half. It's in the nature of our shadows that we cannot see them clearly. To look at them directly would be too painful. For this reason, shadows are more easily identified by other people, and conflict is likely to result when one person remarks on the shadow side of another person. So if someone comes up to you, I'm going to use my mom as an example for this one, and this actually paints her in a nice light and me in a not so good one. Um, because of the trauma I was suppressing, and because I'd never told a soul, not even my parents, and for the people that think, well, your parents shouldn't know, okay, no, I was groomed so young that I was just me around my parents, and everybody just thought I was quiet because I'm an only child. So I mean, I talk about my soul sisters and my soul brothers, but I grew up an only child, so a lot of times I had to self-entertain, and that's fine because I'm great at self-entertaining. But and if you talk to somebody else, all of a sudden your parents think you're crazy, so you just kind of keep it to a minimum and in your head. But yeah, so it was probably just felt natural, right? Yeah, I don't have a lot to say. I'm around adults all the time, so I'm just gonna sit here and be me. But and I was also very shy. But I think the reason I was shy was because I didn't feel worthy of being around other people, because I did feel gross. I did feel dirty. I did feel icky and shameful and all that. And a lot of times it took everything that I had inside of me to not burst out and say something, because and I'm not going to go into that. There's reasons why, and those that's a story for another day. But my parents and I have talked about it, and I hope I've healed their hearts, because it wasn't their fault. I'm grateful to them. um I'm going to be honest with you. Growing up, they're the reason I'm still alive. They kept me on this side of life, and because and I'm very grateful. I've always been very close to my parents, probably unusually close to my parents, because when you get to be an older kid, you're like, yeah, I want to break free and go travel the world. Me, it's just kind of like, I could only move a county away. But I mean, it's all better now, and I'm a free spirit now because I've healed. But I healed with scars. So the reason I'm going to use my mom is because a lot of times, like I said, when you suppress the trauma, it can come out in different ways. And apparently I had a tone. And apparently I still have a tone sometimes, but I don't notice it, but I had a big tone when I was younger. And if I were to go back and think about if I had a time machine and I could go back to every time she said, you need to watch your tone, I'd be, because sometimes she says, well, you need to watch your tone because, other people may not realize that. And, she wasn't wrong. But when I go back to it, I remember older sibling and I were talking about this one day. And I said to her, and I know you guys probably think it's weird that I call her older sibling, but that's kind of my nickname for her. Older sibling and baby sibling. Those are my nicknames for them. They do have names. They do have names. But but yeah, I call sibling all the time. That's what her nickname is. But but yeah, older sibling and I were talking about it, and I'm like, do I still have a tone? And it was just so random. She just looked at me like, what? That was came out of nowhere. But I'm like, yeah. I said I was just thinking about my mom, and I was just saying something to you, and I'm like, did that come out with a tone? And she's like, no. And I'm all like, oh. And then we had like an hour-long conversation about it, and we were just talking, and I was like, wow. I said, the shadow work must be working because and my mom might have been a little bit sensitive to my tone. She's my mom, but you know how we can get, right? but but every so often I also noticed, my dad and I were talking one day, and something was in the back of my mind just bothering me, and he's all like, are you okay? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's all, well, you got a tone. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I was literally just thinking about something in the back of my head, and I didn't even realize I had a tone. He's like, yeah, your tone just totally changed. Or not totally. My dad doesn't say totally. He's like, yeah, your tone just changed a lot. And I was like, oh. And so that was another thing. But see, I didn't lash out, and I had already done the shadow work healing, well, at least the preliminary steps of it. So when he said that to me, it wasn't a trigger. Now, a couple years, 5 years ago, he would have said, yeah, your tone changed, and the same tone that he might have said it. And I would have been, well, what's that supposed to mean? And then that would have just gone into a whole different direction it didn't need to go in. So it is likely that a lot of times, especially people who know and care about you, are going to see patterns in you that you may not be able to recognize. And I can tell this is making me a little nervous because I'm literally sitting here with my other hand just playing with everything on the desk. And that's where, when I'm uncomfortable or my anxiety starts to peak, it just kind of does that. But when this happens, this is one of the reasons why I said too, if you're going to do shadow work, you are going to bring up a lot of things that you might remember that might lead to things that you didn't remember, that you've blocked in your mind because it was too much. And that happens a lot where we just kind of like cover things up with dirt, right? Like, oh, maybe you broke a glass out in the backyard and you don't want anyone to find it, right? And so your mom's like, hey, what happened to that glass that, I don't know. And then one day someone steps on it and you're like, uh-oh, because the grass pushed it back up, right? Well, we can try to bury things and we can try to hide it, but eventually it will come back up. And when you start to do the shadow work, and there may not be anything buried, you just may be holding that bag going, oh my God, and just, or oh, whatever, and just kind of like, what do I do with this? Well, you heal it. You heal it. And that's the best that we can do for ourselves. Shadow work is not going to be comfortable, but it doesn't have to be super uncomfortable if you're willing to do the work. If you're willing to look at the painful parts of your life and yourself that you may not like, that you may feel ashamed about, that you may feel shame for. It took me years to realize that what happened to me was not my fault, and it was not my shame to carry. And so I refuse to carry it now. And when those moments come up where I do start to question things or feel self-doubt, it's like, no, I'm not going to let this, hover over me anymore. And I'm certainly not going to let it take over my life again. It ran my life for far too long. I've dealt with self-doubt, low self-esteem, low confidence, and I'm trying to build those up now. I still have a problem with self-worth. I still have a problem with self-love, but I'm working on it. And the more shadow work I've done, even for the little bits, whatever shadow work I need to do from time to time to keep myself balanced is what I do. And when my shadow starts to come up, I realize, okay, there's an imbalance in me. Yesterday, I was having all kinds of weird ticks. I get this weird tick in my throat, and it was really bad yesterday. And I don't know what it is or what it was, but today it's gone. Today it's gone. But I know something must have been bothering me yesterday. And so later I'm going to journal and try to figure out what the hell it was. But something needed to come up and out. And that's my body's tell on how to do that. So I don't always have people that will notice these things in me, but I can see them now because I have been doing the work. So if someone points something out to you, don't do your best to take a deep breath and just say, what do you mean? Sometimes people are just mean, okay? Let's be honest. We're human. Some people are just mean. But if it's someone that says this to you that you trust, you love, whatever, and, they're all like, are you okay? Because this is kind of a thing right now. And you're like, oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. My sinuses are draining. I'm so sorry. Anyways, just try to take a deep breath and talk with them through it. Okay, because sometimes we may have, sometimes we may have stuff that just happens that we're not even aware of because it's just coming up. All right. So, I think the higher powers are telling me you need to shut up now. So anyways, that was that. Okay. We went through the entire thing. Don't be afraid of your shadow. It is a part of you. It needs to be healed. I'm going to do my best over the next week to help you through preliminary steps on figuring out how to really kind of buckle down so that you really can enforce your self-love. And if you're new to this series, you can go back and watch the self-love series that I just did. I don't think I was uploading the ones from January, which I abruptly stopped. And again, I apologize for that, but I did go through the 21, and they're all on YouTube. Okay, and that's the one place where you can just find them all together. So, again, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Time, Facebook Live. All lives are public. Anybody can watch under Shelly Marie Lucas, and then across the board, you can find me either under the Aloha Perspective, or you can search me by my first name and my last name. Again, Shelly Marie Lucas. Shelly Marie is one word, little M. It's my mom coming out. But yeah, so you can find me there. All right. Take care of yourselves. And again, this is going to require journaling. And you're like, I know, what do I want to do homework for? Journaling has saved my life. I love journaling. I've always loved to write, but I've never been good at writing what's in my head. And that's where it really started to change my life. So I'm not saying that's for everybody, but right now, while you're doing the shadow work, I highly recommend you find a cheap notebook and just, journal your little hearts out. All right. Thank you, Allie, for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. I'm sorry, you guys, that I was all over the board today. My brain has been squirreling hard, but it's just kind of like, you know what? I think that's just my personality. So I probably need to stop apologizing for it. But again, I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you again, Allie, for watching. Oh, hi, Paula. I just saw Paula came on. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later, and I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great day.